Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and this is going to be a slightly different video to our normal tutorial style. It's going to be more about me embarking on a new project, sharing a few ideas with you, and hoping that actually some of you are going to be able to join me on it as well. But as I mentioned in a recent video when I was painting the Chaos Possessed Marines, Chaos across all the various systems has always really been my favourite stuff. I love the artwork, I love the vibe, and when I look back at all the projects I've completed, a lot of them are Chaos, and I think that's probably very good evidence that there's something I really enjoy about them. So when Games Workshop sent us the new Slaves to Darkness army set, launch set, it was good times. Our commissions head, Ben, is also a huge Slaves to Darkness fan. And both of us from the old world had previous Chaos armies, and we sort of said, wouldn't it be fun to do a little project where we both paint up a Chaos army together, we play some games, pop up to Warhammer World, we'll film it all, be a right giggle. And then we thought it might be fun if any of you wanted to join us. So over on our Discord channel, I'm going to open up a little, I don't know what it's called, subcategory thing. I'm absolutely terrible on Discord, I promise I'll get better at it. But basically a little sub-forum thing just about this Slaves to Darkness project. It's not going to be one of these Taylor 2 Gamers type things that meanders on for months and months and everyone drops out and it never gets done. Our plan is to start it in January, and we're probably going to take a maximum of 2 months to get a 2,000 point army done. And then we're going to meet up at One World and play some games. Like I said, all the rest of it. So if you fancy joining us on there with your own Chaos project in the new year, then feel free to jump in. And this video is all about me sort of coming up with a scheme that I think I'm going to go with. Now, I've chosen to sort of lean into the Be'lakor side of things. I quite like the background where there's this schism between Be'lakor and Archaon and all of that. So I wanted to go for his scheme. And the burgundy colour is obviously a key colour of his, but as we've seen with Eternus and the new sort of scheme they seem to have painted a lot of the new miniatures in, is this silver with a light gold trim and then some burgundy on them. And I like that, but I'm a little bit concerned that if I go all metallic on the scheme, it's going to look a little bit too busy, a little bit too noisy, and I'm not really going to be able to enjoy the bits of painting that I'm particularly enjoying doing at the moment as much as I would be able to do if I was to do a flat scheme. So I'm going to try and work out how I can take those colours, perhaps change silver to grey, play around with the amounts of burgundy and stuff, and see if I can come up with a scheme that I like, that I think when you glance at it you'll go, oh, is that to do with Be'lakor? And that'd be cool. And Ben's going to paint his stuff up being very much sort of Archaon's lot from the All Points, so there'll be a nice little bit of story going there. We're calling it Path to Glory. We're not going to be following the Path to Glory stuff. We're just doing it our own way, with our own background, our own reasonings, and ultimately coming up with what we think is going to be two really cool looking armies. So let's paint. Now I'm going to use one of the new Chaos Chosen models as a tester. I'll always do testers before I embark on an army project, but I've already done quite a lot of prep before I've hit this model with any paint. I had all my paints out in front of me. I've got a few old Space Marine models that are sprayed umpteen times that I might just check a couple of colours on, check it's coming out the way I want it to, before I embark on the first model itself. And I wanted to use the model that was going to be in the army as the tester because, you know, I think it's the best way. Colours, it's not just about colours, it's how do they interact, all the trim, all the different bits and bobs, the bone and things like that. It's important to know how they're going to interact on the models that you choose. So for this project, I really want to use sort of favourite paints of mine. I just want it to be fun. I really don't want too much thinking. So I went with Petroleum Grey by Scale 75 all over. I've thinned that just over 50-50 with airbrush thinner. I'm spraying at about 25 to 30 psi in a 0.4mm needle and nozzle airbrush. It's one of our Cult of Paint evolutions. So once I've got a nice base coat of that down, I've now added in Rakarth Flesh, and this is approximately 50-50 Rakarth Flesh to the Petroleum Grey that's in there. You can see that the colour we come up with there is the highlight, and you can see that first highlight was really broad. I was covering the majority of the armour, leaving just that dark Petroleum Grey in the shadows. Now I'm going to go for the final highlight, and I've simply doubled the amount of Rakarth Flesh here, so it's approximately 2 to 1. Rakarth to petroleum. And now I'm being a little bit more focused with my highlights. The nice part about these Chaos models is they're very angular, certainly the Chosen are and the Warriors and stuff. So we can, if we want, do some quite dramatic contrasts, or light and dark. I'm not sure quite how much contrast I want, so I sort of went for somewhere in the middle, and I'm pretty happy with that there at this stage. Now, one of the things that I've enjoyed doing a lot recently is using oil paint filtering and stuff. You'll have seen recently in the guard video and in the particularly in the Votan video I did, but it's quite a time intense process, or relatively time intense process, and I thought, well, I wonder if I can get away with not doing it, and we'll just do a sort of a traditional oil wash and see if that does the filtering job. So for that, I've picked this colour called Smoke by Absalom 502. I've mixed this into a wash consistency. I've used mineral spirits to thin it down with, and this is job, as I say, is to filter. It's not really to add lots of definition into the recesses and stuff. It's just to slightly change the tone of the grey across the model. One of the things I wanted to focus on with the grey, and most of the model really, was to try and have a bit of purple or sort of burgundy across nearly everything. So that's why I chose that petroleum grey, and it's why I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh as my highlight across most of the stuff. Now, over on Patreon, the last few months, I've been doing a little series on speed painting, where I've been taking things like Warcry warbands, Necromunda gangs, and just trying out a variety of new recipes, new products, and just sort of blasting through stuff that I'm enjoying but I don't overly care about. So if it's not quite as good as I want it doesn't really matter. They're just playing pieces for skirmish games, and they're fun to use. And that's all been really with this project in mind as an end point. I really want to get this one done in the new year. So I wanted to come up with a couple of recipes that I thought would help. So big thanks to those of you over on Patreon that are supporting us and allowing us to do these extra videos each week over on there, as well as here on YouTube. Now, once that's dried, I blacked out the bits on the armour that weren't going to be grey. This was a good opportunity for me to look at how much trim do I actually want to paint. Now, I'm a big fan of not painting trim, and that's nothing to do with saving time. I like the look, particularly on things like Space Marines, which obviously I paint a lot of on here. I wasn't quite sure how that was going to translate over on these Chaos models, so I've blacked out what I think I'm going to paint as metallic trim. It's given me a good idea of how it balances out across the model, but I'm still not really going to find out till I get that metal on there. Now, obviously they've all got slightly different cloths and skins and things like that on them, but I need to try and get this burgundy colour on all of them somehow. And the obvious place is going to be on the robes or the loincloths like this, and on things like the weapon haft wraps. It's a good place to pop it in. So I've base coated it using Baraknar Burgundy, again one of my favourite colours. So the point of this project is use old favourites that I really like. And to highlight, I'm just mixing Rakarth Flesh into that Baraknar Burgundy. So again, I've got one colour that I'm using to highlight nearly all the other colours on my model by mixing it in. It's going to bring a little bit of harmony to the model, but what it's also going to do is just speed the process up. It's fewer paints for me to have to buy, it's fewer paints for me to have on the desk on my palette. So once that was done, I just needed to do a little bit of chipping on the armour. Now, one of the benefits of doing a test piece like this is that I don't need to paint it perfectly. I'm going to paint this to about 80%-ish of the level I would want to paint it at if it was going to be in my army. It's really to get an idea of how do the colours work together, what do I need to change and stuff. So it's nice and relaxing, but if you think, this is a little bit sloppy compared to sometimes, that's the reason for it. There's just no need for me to paint this flawlessly because it's not going to go in my army. That's not its job to do. So once I've done a little bit of chipping, and there I just mixed the Rakarth Flesh into the petroleum grey, chipped along all the edges, picked a brown. I've used Rhinox Hide here, again an old favourite, and just fill that in just to see how that brown works. And that was to see if Rhinox was the right colour to use. Did I need a colder brown? Was it too red? It ended up working nicely. Now, for the bone elements on the model, I'm just going to follow the old bone recipe that I've done in another video on here, so I'll link that up in the corner now. Obviously there's loads of horns and skulls and things on the models, and I really like my sort of go-to bone recipe. And as I say, I'm not really looking to learn much new on this project. Let's just have a cool looking army. So going back to go-to recipes and products is the plan. So once I had all the non-metallic elements painted on the model, I'm just giving it a couple of coats of ultra matte varnish. This is by MIG. And just to tie it together, just to even out the finish across the model. Now for the trim, I wanted this really light sort of brass colour because I wanted to use a lot of verdigris. I love turquoise and purple, I think it goes great together. And again, it's something I enjoy doing. And I'd noticed it on the Eternus model. They'd used a little of it. I thought, great, it's another way I can reinforce that's what I'm doing here. So I'm base coating in one of my all-time favourite paints, Decayed Metal. And then the main colour is going to be Runelord Brass by Games Workshop. Games Workshop changed the formula for this a year or two ago, and I love it. And I haven't really been able to use it in anger on a project. So I thought, why not just do it on this one and sort of get stuck in. It's pretty simple. I'm just stippling it all over and leaving a little bit of the decayed metal in the recesses. Incidentally, although I've said this is going to be really quick, I actually painted that weapon halved really well for me. I don't know whether you get it with bits of models. There's always something that I always causes me more bother than it should, and it's painting wraps around weapons. I think I rush it too much. I think I get to it near the end of the model and I'm bored of it and I want to rush, and I end up just not doing a very good job on it. But anyway, it's by the by. For the verdigris, I'll link up in the top how I do the verdigris. I really enjoyed doing that video, and I've just followed the oil method for this one. Now for the silver parts of the model, again I needed a reliable paint, I needed a colour I liked, and I needed a colour that I hoped would have a little bit of a purple tint to it, and Burnt Iron by Vallejo Metal Colour Series is absolutely perfect for this. So I'm just going to give that a couple of coats and then give it a couple of enamel washes. So even though this was a quick tester, I'd already gone through a fairly broad range of emotions by this point, but we'll chat about that when we rip it apart in a minute. Now I'm going to use an enamel wash all over the armour, Starship wash by MIG again. This is sort of a nice brown wash and just going to grunge up the armour a bit, and this time it will add a bit more definition in there as well. I used this on the steel, on the hammerhead as well, but I also mixed in a little bit of track wash, which is a bit more brown, just to give it a little bit more colour into the steel. You see I haven't revarnished the model or anything, and I'm just washing it all over. Something I wish I hadn't done. So we'll have a look at the finished model, as it were, in a second. But this is one of the big take-home notes from the tester, as at this point I'm going to pin wash this rather than wash it all over. So I would gloss varnish the model and then pin wash in the Starship wash. So that would be slightly earlier on in the process, before I did the metals. That's when I'd slot it in. So we can have a look at him here, and on the whole I'm pretty happy. I think it comes across as the Be'lakor follower that I wanted. I don't think it comes across as Slaanesh. That was one of my worries. I had considered doing burgundy as the main armour colour, but what put me off that was, again, people assuming it would be Slaanesh marked. And I really enjoy the background. It's possibly my favourite part of the hobby, so it matters to me. Like, if people glance at it, what they think, is it God aligned, is it not? So for that reason, I'm decided against the burgundy. I may still do a tester, or it may simply be that I find models in the army that I do go all in on the burgundy. But it's fine, but it's not the dominant one across the whole force. So if I'm going to be critical of it, what can I take from this test model? What can I change going forward? So as I said, I would obviously execute everything about 20% more. It's not going to take that much more time, but it would really enhance the look. For the armour, I said I want to pin wash it. The other thing is, I think I would go brighter with my final airbrush highlight. It's definitely a fault of mine. I love painting sort of grim, grungy, dark looking miniatures, and I think I too often go too dark. And with this in mind, that this is going to be an army I want to take to events and play with and go down the club and everything, it needs to look good on the table, not just on the shelf or under the painting lamps. So I think a little bit brighter on the highlight would help with that. And if I'm honest, I miss the oil dot filtering. I love what it brings to a model, and it's something I'm really enjoying doing at the moment. So I need to think long and hard as to whether it's something I want to spend the time on. Incidentally, my 2K list is nearly all armoured models, so Knights, Chosen, Warriors, Eternus. That's the route I want to go with it. So there's going to be a lot of armour to paint, which I thought was going to make the project a little quicker. It may not. One thing I didn't expect with this is I might swap the trim idea around. I really like how the silver has come out, or the steel colour has come out on the hammerhead, but I don't love how the brass colour has come out on the armour trim. So I may do a tester where I swap those around, or I may simply do all of the trim but do it in the silver colour, and then save that verdigris brass for things like the right knee pad on here, or the little, I don't know what you call it, his little badge up on his shoulder, something like that. Save that for the verdigris, because I'm not sure a brass verdigris weapon would look good. I'm not sure. I definitely need to try that one out. Not on a whole model, but perhaps just on a weapon. And for the verdigris itself, I did not have the control I needed. I don't think, using the oils to do the verdigris with. It's messy, and that's not just because I haven't executed it properly. I've executed it properly, it just doesn't work right for this. So I may choose to do the acrylic verdigris technique, which is in that video that I linked earlier. So those are my main sort of things I'm going to think about. Oh, and I'm going to go snow basing. I've never done snow basing on an army before. I might do an entirely separate video on that when I figure out how to get it looking like I want it to. I hope you found some useful tidbits in this video that might help you out with your own projects in the sort of planning phases and the value of using a test model. But also, as I say, don't feel your test model has to be perfect. That's not necessarily its job. If you fancy joining me and Ben on this Path to Glory adventure, then check out the Cult Discord. Like I said, I'll pop a link down in the description. If you've got any questions about what I've done, pop them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as you can. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you're not already. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.